Hi, this is Dr. Y. I am a behavioral health doctor and a licensed clinician. And today is part 4 about trauma and mental health. Okay, so today I want to share with you 5 ways that trauma can tap into self-blame. Yeah. This one is really important to me because I see this a lot in terms of guilt, resentment, regret, shame. Sometimes people blame themselves for a traumatic event, woulda, coulda, shoulda type situation. And I think that all of these mindsets can be very dangerous in terms of getting better and moving through the grief associated with trauma. Now, I want to point out that children, adolescents, and adults can all feel these feelings of self-blame. And there are some different ways that it shows up. So let me share them with you now. Okay, so I want you to know that this is something that is common when working with patients that come in seeking treatment for trauma. Now, with that being common, it doesn't mean that it's true. Okay, that self-blame is being attached to people who have already experienced trauma and it wasn't any fault of their own. Now, the number one reason why sometimes people come in and they say, you know what, I should have done this, or I could have done that, or if I would have done this, is because it can be the psyche's way of trying to make sense of what happened. To avoid feelings of anger or despair, it's easier for them to feel guilt than anger. Now think about that. It is easier sometimes to feel guilt than anger. Anger is a powerful emotion. It requires a lot of energy. And usually we can be angry with ourselves sometimes, but usually that anger is pointed towards someone else. And there are a lot of people in that traumatic process, meaning once they've experienced a tragedy, that do not have the energy and they do not feel or want to feel those feelings of anger. And so many times it will move into feelings of guilt, meaning it was my fault. I should have done something, or I could have done something different. Sometimes self-blame can show up in this way too. This is number 2, all right? It's how you survived in an unsafe or stressful situation, such as living with someone who is harming you. So again, it's sort of tied to number 1, but I want you to think about it as a stress response, as a survival response. Well, it was my fault, especially if you are the person that's being harmed in the home. And it doesn't matter if you're a child or an adult. A lot of times in those situations, you've probably been told that it's your fault and you deserve it. But that is not true, okay? So number 2 is how you have survived in a situation. So number 3 taps into self-blame because you really are feeling like you wish you could have done something different in that situation to avoid that tragedy, but you just didn't, or you couldn't. There's a lot of people that have regret about certain tragedies that happen, and they second guess, well, if I wouldn't have gotten onto that plane, or if I didn't get into that car, or if I would have just said no, or whatever, right? It's the if-then problem. The truth is, you were making the best decision that you could with the information that you had in the moment. And that self-blame keeps us from getting better. Number 4, so this definitely can tap into self-blame, is when someone else blames you for what happened. Okay, it's really hard to tell yourself after a tragedy that you didn't have anything to do with it. I promise you, there's going to be a lot of situations where people are going to second guess themselves. And it doesn't help when you have other people blaming you. This is definitely a way that self-blame can creep in and keep people from getting better and healing from trauma. So number 5, you were made to feel responsible for someone else's actions, even if they had power over you. Okay, so sometimes this is called the transfer of responsibility. Transfer of responsibility. And in simple terms, folks, this is manipulation. It's also gaslighting, okay? When someone else tries to make you feel that you're responsible for their actions, that is manipulation, folks. And that is simply untrue. So this is how people can get stuck in these trauma cycles of the mental, physical, and emotional symptoms that happen post-trauma, because we start to doubt our own efficacy, right? We doubt our self-worth. We doubt our choices. We doubt the way that we're perceiving the trauma. And because of that, if there are people in your life that are manipulative, they can come in and they can use that vulnerability to make things worse. Now, even though self-blame can be difficult to cope with, I want you to understand that there might be the possibility that it's your mind's way of trying to cope. Our mind does interesting and sometimes crazy things to try and cope with tragedy and with trauma. So what I'm hoping is that you can take whatever feelings that you might be having associated with trauma and self-blame and go seek professional help. Go to a support group, go to a professional that can help you work through these thoughts without all of the voices of the outside in your head. And this could be people too. Sometimes people who even have the best of intentions really can't help us through this situation. If you've gone through a truly traumatic experience, trying to cope with this on your own is very difficult to do. So consider seeking help and support. You deserve it, and no, it's not your fault. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Next week, part 5 is coming out on this trauma series. Thank you so much for your support.